This week's episode is brought to you by Blue Harvest Vintage. Are you a collector? Blue Harvest love to help you find that missing piece you need to complete your collection. They have extensive stock of vintage Star Wars vehicles and mint-on-card action figures, as well as new The Force Awakens and Black Series items. Blue Harvest have Funko Pops, Lego, Dinky, Corgi, Matchbox and more. Everything a collector could possibly need. If they don't stock it, then let them know, and their knowledgeable staff will be only too pleased to help. Head to Morley Market in Leeds to see the life-size Darth Vader. Alternatively, reach out to Blue Harvest on Twitter at Blue Harvest UK, Facebook, Blue Harvest Vintage Collectibles, a website, blueharvestvintage.co.uk, or email at blueharvesttoys@gmail.com.
Talk Star Wars is a proud member of the Star Wars Commonwealth Podcast Network. Follow at SW Commonwealth on Twitter and take your first steps into a larger world.
Welcome to TSW After Darkside. You rebel fleets want to play rough? Okay, say hello to my little apprentice. Hooah!
I wonder what we didn't talk about. I mean, it's getting late. I don't know. Really got to think about hitting the pit. I know you guys are doing dark and so on, but
well, we're recording now, Paul. So just go, and this will become part of the After Darkside. That's fine.
I was going to say, well, I might still be going into iffy territory.
That's fine. That's fine.
The whole Mark Hamill story that was rather taboo.
Yeah.
I think I told you.
Do you know? It's funny you say that, Paul, because until you sent it out, I hadn't heard a word of it. It's the first that you sending it out was the first I'd heard of it. Genuinely, I had no perspective on it before that point.
Steve,
I was like, okay.
Steve and I had similar feelings on the whole thing. I mean, Steve basically said, in a nutshell, what's it got to do with the rest of the world?
True.
Which I agreed with. And I basically said, in a nutshell, when you look at the bigger picture, this actually comes down to the two individuals, really.
Absolutely.
One of which couldn't deal with it at all. The other one probably couldn't deal with it.
Yeah.
Should we give this a bit of context, seeing as we're recording this?
Yeah, I mean, to encourage someone to possibly look down the correct path is not forcing them to do anything. But anyway, there you go. Yeah.
Just to give that a little bit of context then. So this week, I toyed with putting it on the main show, not the question, but addressing the fact that there was a question.
Yeah.
But what I ended up doing is I ended up emailing Reese privately and just sort of saying that we weren't going to address it on the show. So just for the benefit of you guys listening, this week we had a question from Reese McMenamin, long-time contributor to the show, long-time listener, VIP, friend of the show, without a doubt. Sent us a question that sort of focused on a subject in the news revolving around Mark Hamill, which I'm not going to go into here. But it was a little bit too deep, a little bit too hardcore for Talk Star Wars, which is a light-hearted.
It's not Star Wars as such, is it?
And it's not Star Wars, and it's not the light-hearted stuff that we really do on the podcast.
Yeah.
Reese kind of knew that. He said, I understand this if this is a little bit too heavy for you to sort of address on the main show.
Very clear on that, wasn't he?
From the outset, he was very understanding that we might not want to do it. And I did, for days, I agonised it. And I know I emailed you guys, and we ended up taking a vote on it.
Yeah.
Which was kind of inconclusive because there's four of us.
Yeah, there was sort of equal number of things on both sides who were like, either were kind of keen on not talking about it or wasn't really bothered one way or the other about talking about it, right?
Yeah, and I think what it really come down to for me was that I felt that regardless of whether or not there's any substance to the story factually as it relates to Mark and Mark's family, it was still a subject that I don't feel qualified to comment on.
No, it's not prudent.
I don't think I have the skills either to comment on it intelligently and in a way that would make me seem like I'm informed. And I think I'd be clattering through the subject and doing more harm than good, to be perfectly frank.
Okay.
Which is why I decided to kind of step away from it. And Reese understood that.
Yeah, it's also a story, but depending where you read your information, you're going to get a biased source. Yeah.
I would
So
think
Seems to be the case. It's all a lot of
it
it's speculation
it is
as well.
technically, yeah, it is. It's technically impossible to tread. You read one article,
Yeah.
and the family said this, and this. You read another article, the family said something quite different.
Yeah,
So you're like,
this is
well,
it.
hang on a minute, and we've only got the girl's word from
One
the
way or the
press that she said
need to
anything
hear.
anyway.
Yeah,
and
we
you're
need
like,
to hear
well,
both sides
I'm not hearing
before we-
anything from so nothing official came out, and
No,
so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, it's a
Between them,
situation
between that,
between the family and the family only.
Yep.
And regardless of what happens, we still hold him in the highest regard because what we've seen seems rather appealing. But more than anything, he plays a character that we adore in a particular manner that we
Yes.
adore. And that's what our podcast is about, Mark, at the end of the day.
yeah,
indeed.
absolutely.
And one crucial thing to keep in mind about all this, and this is a comment that I kind of make generally, is that you have to be able to distinguish the performer or the creator from the creation, because otherwise you could never enjoy the works of H.P. Lovecraft or something like that. Because or even a more recent example, I love the works of Orson Scott Card as a science fiction author. I think he makes fantastic books, but I don't agree with him on everything.
No, his politics are interesting, to say the least.
Yeah,
I'm
his
an Ender's
politics
Game
are
freak.
Interesting. Yeah, his politics are interesting. I don't agree with all of them. I don't know enough about his situation to understand where his politics come from.
Still love his books.
Absolutely, exactly.
Yeah.
This is it.
Yeah.
I love his books, and I found him. Have you ever listened to the audiobook of Ender's Game?
No.
They did a I think either 25th or 30th anniversary, wasn't fully cast, but it had different narrators. It was sort of anniversary edition, and it had a 20-minute long interview with Orson Scott Card, and he's fascinating. To listen to him talk about the book and all that stuff was fascinating. I don't know if I'd go to a seminar where he was talking about anything other than his books.
And he does quite often.
He does, absolutely.
Yep.
I may be interested because I try my best to take in opinions that I don't necessarily agree with. Even if I still disagree with them at the end, I still need to hear them, because to me, the only way to get rid of bad ideas is to challenge them. You can't just suppress them for a start. You can't say, oh, well, you can't express that idea. Like, why
No,
not?
you can't.
Because you end up with tyranny.
I've been accused of something on several occasions that I actually put on my CV, believe it or not. And I've had discussions in job interviews about this single line on my CV. It actually says that I am absolutely crazy about in-depth conversation and debates and so on.
Okay.
And I've been known to take a stance completely opposite to my own beliefs purely to keep the conversation going.
That's interesting.
I think it's necessary, actually.
I do sometimes find that I don't need to go out of my way to do that, because some people I know just hold completely opposing political viewpoints to me. It doesn't even have to be politics, but just
but if I find them in a room where everyone's talking the same thing, I'll go the other direction.
Yeah, I think that's
I'm
fine.
not afraid of playing devil's
that's
advocate.
That's me just without trying sometimes.
I'm just an argumentative git.
That's fine.
But I try to do it with as much basis and information as I can muster. I try to put valid, correct points across. I really do.
And this is the thing, again, if the people who say the ideas you don't agree with, like, let's say for argument's sake that it's a situation where you don't agree with what's being said, right? Let's not say that you're taking the opposite side of the fence just for the sake of it, although it is relevant too. If you don't challenge those ideas, they don't form, because they're just words that people say. That sometimes they're things that people think they should feel. They're not actually things that they've come to through any kind of experience or anything. They've just heard it parroted by somebody they respect. So they go, oh, well, that must be the correct way of thinking then. So they'll repeat it verbatim. But actually, you need to form those ideas with your own lens on the world.
Yeah, which is why you have to take all forms of press and media with a pinch of salt, because it's one-way street.
Very much so, because everybody has their agendas, no matter who they are. There is no partisan media. There just isn't. Everybody's got their own. Yeah. So
Hope they're not listening.
I don't have an agenda, and I want you both to agree with me on that.
Shut up, Mark.
Well, we all want things, darling.
We've had a
question you mentioned.
We had an email. It wasn't so much a question, but it was Nathan Roberts.
Yes.
Nathan Wankanobi.
Yes.
Sent us an email based on some of the content that we've been discussing in the past few weeks, like some of the creepy stuff.
You are now entering
some of
the After Darkside zone.
Yeah, that's the one.
Submitted for your approval.
Well, he's made a couple of recommendations, and I've already sampled some of the wares that Nathan's been pitching, and I wondered if you guys had. So this is Nathan's email entitled After Darkside. Hey guys, loving the creepy discussions of late. I wanted to recommend a couple of podcasts I listened to in that vein. The first is Lore. Have you heard of Lore?
I've heard of Lore. I've heard it's excellent.
Which is a podcast done by a horror writer. It's basically a telling of several thematically related spooky stories every episode.
I've heard nothing but good things about Lore. I've heard it's superb.
I listened to it. I was listening to it from the start. I don't listen to it anymore because I literally don't have the time in my schedule to squeeze that in along with all the Star Wars and movie stuff that I listen to.
Yeah, fair enough.
But it is incredibly well produced and researched. It is an exceptional podcast, and I highly recommend it if people want to have the willies put up them.
Oh my!
The second, back to in Nathan's words,
it's crazy.
The second is Black.
He's been walking in the main show. It's crazy.
Yeah.
What are we doing, Mark?
The second recommended podcast is The Black Tapes, which is a fictional paranormal This American Life spoof. It's fantastic. I hope you guys check them out if you haven't already. Would love to hear what you guys think about them. So, I've been listening to both of those shows. I jumped off The Black Tapes quite early. I heard of it at the start on Nerdist. They gave it a shout out and said it was like a supernatural serial, which I love serial. I like
Count Chocula.
Yeah, I love. No.
The other kind.
The actual serial by NPR. I love that.
I've heard the first series. The second series kind of didn't really draw me in.
Yeah, not so much. But the original one is to me still the pinnacle of podcasting.
Our first series is brilliant.
Yeah, and I listen to This American Life every week, and things like Radio Lab, and I'm not unfamiliar with high quality podcast shows.
I have a follow-up question on this, actually. So carry on.
Well, I plunged into the Black Tapes thinking, well, if it's being put on,
good enough for them.
Yeah. And it didn't live up to it for me.
Not for you. Okay, fair enough.
I think it might
be
all
the subjective,
fact that it's fiction. If it was genuine, or if there was some ambiguity there, like could this be real, like a Blair Witch type thing, I might get more out of it. But it's not really for me. And sometimes it's a little bit poor in terms of the acts. It's like a radio play, really. Have you heard of it, Paul?
Oh, okay.
No, sorry.
The Black Tapes, no?
I thought I was thinking about an alternative site. I remember there was a site called the Black Vault, and I thought you were going to go in that direction, but it doesn't sound like it's related at all. So
no, I don't think it is. What was your point you were going to make, Rob?
I was going to ask actually, because on the subject of podcasting, I wonder if people would find it interesting to know what we listen to in terms of our podcast rotation outside of the obvious.
Yeah.
Well, I only really listen to one, I'm afraid.
What do you listen to?
It better be TSW, Paul, or swear to God.
No, I don't listen to this. I'm outside this. I
listen back to it.
Well, I do sometimes, actually. I do sometimes. But I listen to, a bit sad, but I like it. I listen to something every week called The Atheist Experience.
Okay.
Which is a guy called Matt Dillahunty. It's basically trying to separate church from state, all those kind of arguments.
Oh, okay.
And I used to listen to it just for fun because it used to be like, I could prove God. It's written down. That was the limit of the argument. But they do get some pretty good guys, and they get calls from all over the world on a Sunday afternoon. I normally listen to it Monday night while I'm in bed with an earphone in. But you get some pretty highbrow arguments, but primarily, obviously, because of the title, it is purely faith. It's secular versus
secular versus faith-based.
Stuff. But you'd be interested to see how far it goes on occasion.
Yeah.
It does bring in political angle and financial angles and everything else that's going on in the world, and everything that goes on today. I mean, there's so much. I'm not going to say faith, religion tied into all sorts of elements, whether you're considering religion to be a situation for Christianity or Judaism or simply for Zionism, whichever direction you want to go. And that's where the political intrigue comes into it and so on and so forth. So it does get a little bit bendy on occasion.
Yeah. Now, in the interest of balance, do you listen to a faith-based podcast? I'm joking. I don't know.
No, to be honest, I should, because I'd like to hear secular callers call those shows with their argument. But I reckon 80% of the callers are of a Christian or
so it's alternative faith. So it's an atheist podcast that's hearing out. It's an atheist
podcast that allows
the religious viewpoint,
allows theists to prove them wrong.
Oh, nice. Okay, great. I like this. That sounds good.
Paul, you need to go and you need to look up. There's a show called I think it's called Here Be Monsters.
I used to listen to him.
Yeah, he deals with a couple of stories about radio hosts, talk radio hosts, who have these sort of provocative phone-ins, where you pit one type of person against the other.
Yeah,
sounds a little bit like what you've just been talking about, and that's one of the shows I don't listen to. I'm not sure if that's really being produced regularly enough for me to get much mileage out of it. That Here Be Monsters, but that was a pretty good show. What did you listen to?
Subscribe to that on Apple some moons ago, I think.
Yeah, it was one I picked up quite early on. What about you, Rob? What did you listen to?
I've got quite a few. So it's I mean, obviously there's the Commonwealth. Obviously, I listen back to the Emotionally 14 podcasts because, again, narcissist. And I also like to hear back to make sure that things like the editing is of a sufficiently high standard, because I do kind of try to place high standards on myself when it comes to editing properly. I do the best I can with the tools I've got. I'm trying my best to kind of improve the tool set at the moment, because a lot of it is sound. A lot of the issues, the same mic that I'm using to record Talk Star Wars, which works great for a single voice input, does not work so well when you plonk it in the middle of a table and let four people just yell into it. Not so much. So I'm trying to think about how I'm going to do new kit I'm going to try and retool it a bit. What else do I listen to? I'm kind of working my way up the list. So there's a show, it's just recently gone on like a little break called Word Bugger, which is Joe Crouch's show.
Yeah.
Which is quite in the spirit, actually, Paul. I think you dig this. One takes one position on a question, and the other takes the opposite. So they've got one, but they always talk about this. Is one of the things I like about it. They always talk about things that, in the grand scheme of things, don't matter. So there's one. Their first episode is the prequel trilogy. One likes them, one doesn't, and they just discuss why they do and why they don't.
Everything matters.
Well, you know what I mean. It's not. It doesn't have a grand societal impact so much. It's cultural.
Right.
You know, it's not like they're not talking about. I don't know. Like, they're not kind of taking positions like prime minister's questions. It's purely. I like this. I don't like this. Why do you like this? I will tell you why I like this, and so on. So they've done Tarantino versus Rodriguez. There's a question about, should authors be obliged to finish a series once they've started it in service to the fans?
That's interesting.
So and actually the discussion is quite good. That particular episode is quite one of the highlights. The other one,
only if the fan is obliged to read the entire series.
That's an interesting take. I hadn't thought of it from that point of view. And there's a really good one about M. Night Shyamalan as well. And they're both of the opinion.
They've got a twist at the end.
That would be. I wish. Yeah. But what's brilliant about it is they both kind of agree that he lost his way, but they disagree on when. So they kind of they defend certain films in the series kind of on opposing sides. What else have I got? In the spirit of hearing ideas I might not necessarily agree with, I listen to a conservative radio host in the States called Crowder. Louder with Crowder, it's called. He's a Republican Christian.
Rush Limbaugh.
No, not quite that. He's much more kind of, dare I say, much trendier than Rush Limbaugh. But he's much more. He's really funny as well. He's a former stand-up comedian who's turned into a podcast radio host. And he's just, I don't always agree with everything he says, but I find his point of view interesting and he entertains me. And he also has good guests, and he's very good at bringing on guests, even though the debates get a bit heated sometimes. He's always good at bringing on guests he doesn't necessarily agree with to hear both sides of the argument.
No, that's healthy. Seriously, that's healthy.
In a similar vein, there's this guy's awesome. There's a show called The Rubin Report. It's again another stand-up comedian called Dave Rubin, who does a show, and the entire premise for him is it's the show about big ideas, and it's exactly that point. He considers no subject off limits, and he will let anybody on to discuss their point of view. He won't shout them down. He won't talk over them. He lets them say their piece. He's very keen to make sure he represents them correctly and so on. And he just has, he has an entertaining range of guests. He has some of the ones really kind of bizarre ones, like he's had Roseanne Barr on, and she was fascinating. She was a little bit odd and a bit scary at times, but she's fascinating.
I want to see her go up against Rosie O'Donnell in the same. That'd be an interesting situation.
That'd be amazing. Celebrity Deathmatch returns.
Big Fugle sticks.
And another one, Scott Adams, the guy who wrote Dilbert, is a brilliant interview because he talks about the Trump and Clinton.
Can you send me some links, mate?
Yeah, sure.
Seriously, because you're ringing my bells now. This is interesting stuff.
As I was describing it, I was thinking of you for this one. For this one, so he brought on Scott Adams, the guy who wrote Dilbert, and he talks about, which is really interesting. He doesn't talk about, oh, I love Trump. He talks about, here's why Trump has been good at what he's done, and here's where he's been really successful, and here's where he could have been more successful, and so on. And he looks at it in a very, as objectively as you can with that stuff without having an opinion, I guess. What else we got? Commonwealth. This or That is quite fun. They take 2 points of view. Again, they make you choose between one or two. There are 3 of them in a Skype call. They're really entertaining, really endearing people. Canadian folks, I've chatted to them a bit. They're always Canadian, aren't they? The nice ones. But they'll always do things like, would you rather have a fake boyfriend or girlfriend or an imaginary boat? And basically you can't end the show until everybody has chosen.
I already have an imaginary boat, so.
Well, there you go. You choose that. Fine.
I'm in one now.
No, I already got that, so I might as well.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Have both.
Or, for example, would you rather have the most recent one they did, which was really funny, was would you rather always have to eat in or always have to eat out? Forever. Yeah, I know, right? This is it. And they went into it in a really interesting depth, which is like, you can't have your family around if you always eat out. You have to meet them somewhere else. So you can't have a big family meal like Christmas round at your house. You have to go somewhere else.
But if I go to my mother-in-law's and eat Christmas dinner, that's going out,
Still
right?
Going out.
That counts. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Right, I'm down with that.
Out.
I want to eat out all the
time. We Three Geeks. I quite enjoy that show. Only just started recently.
Rob, do you sleep ever? And
Sorry?
Eat?
I'm very fortunate. A lot of the time I'm able to listen to these things while I'm working.
He's not even made a dent in my list yet, though, Paul. My podcast.
Have I not hit one where we match yet?
Not yet, no.
I'm
Just
not
to
even
give
halfway
people
through.
an idea, apart from the Commonwealth shows, which obviously form the staple of my week.
Yeah.
I listen to just about everything Smodcast puts out.
Okay.
I listen to a couple of shows from the Nerdist Network, a couple of Walking Dead shows every week.
Okay.
But some interesting stuff is Real Crime Profiles, which I find really fascinating.
Yeah, you mentioned that before.
Yeah, former FBI guy and a woman from New Scotland Yard who's also trained at the FBI, and a TV casting executive, because they all work on the same TV show together, and they are looking at specific cases of murders from O.J. Simpson's case, Oscar Pistorius, and now they're doing some really meatier stuff. That's a good show.
Yeah.
Serial, I would highly recommend. If you are a podcaster and you listen to podcasts, there are a few I think that you cannot afford to miss. Serial's one. This American Life is another. And another good show is Radiolab. They will, if nothing else, raise the bar for you. But there's a lot of lessons in there to be learnt. I also listen to Cultcast, which is a podcast about Apple, MakingStarWars.net's Now This Is Podcasting. I enjoy a show that comes out on a Thursday called Bizarre States, which is about the supernatural.
Okay.
Rebel Force Radio, Star Wars show that comes out every Saturday, which are fantastic. I mean, that's just scratching the surface. And then I dip into other things as well, like as we cross bars with people like, is it Juliet on the Unwritable Rant?
I've listened to a few of those. Yeah, I like her.
Blubber the Hut. I like the Joe Rogan podcast, but the Joe Rogan
I love
experience,
Joe Rogan.
But not.
Yes, I love Joe
not
Rogan.
There's a great one out at the moment with Louis Theroux. But it's not
nice.
every episode of his that I enjoy.
It's so long. It's like 3 hours a day.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. I don't know how I love Joe Rogan. I think he's brilliant. And I think he's another one who goes into both sides of the argument and speaks to different people from different points of view.
Yeah.
And he'll challenge ideas that he doesn't agree with, and maybe they'll come to a consensus or a compromise. But maybe they won't, but that's fine. What else? What else you got?
That might be enough for the time being.
Yeah.
I think to get
How
people
many more
started.
have you got then?
I got shitloads.
I got tons and tons.
Yeah.
Really?
I say We Three
Funny.
Geeks is good fun. If you like geek stuff, We Three Geeks is brilliant because they do a theme tune pub quiz every episode. It's really fun.
I find myself I'm topic
How it's not a
based.
copyright nightmare is beyond me. But
That's the thing.
what? Sorry.
I'm topic based, so
Okay.
I don't listen, but I read and read and read and read
Yeah.
and read. But I don't read any mainstream elements. I read.
Okay.
I delve and delve and
I
delve.
re-
and delve
um,
into
So
real
another one,
independent stuff.
another one I've talked about before, Roman Podcast.
Yeah.
I know they listen to the show, and I really love their show. It's just really lovely, relaxed. Two guys just shooting the shit, talking about the news, some of the weird news stories, and they're really funny. I just
Yeah.
find it really entertaining.
I enjoy that.
And they're really
as
nice
well.
guys as well. I've certainly chatted to Rob Cast behind the scenes, and he's a lovely guy. And
More
I bet Roman's
Canadian
lovely
guys.
as well. Exactly right. It's just it's a fucking disease.
The Slash Filmcast.
Just Canadian
love.
pleasantry. I haven't listened to that one.
The Slash Filmcast is what started me off.
Last Points, I like them.
Last point's good, guys.
I listened to. I've given Moviesaurus Rex a go a couple of times. I haven't really delved into it in a regular basis, but I do I quite enjoyed their show.
Yeah,
Whichever one I
Whatnauts.
watched. Talk to. Whatnauts? I've got the Whatnauts on mine. I don't get a chance to listen to them much because a lot of the stuff they're talking about I haven't seen, and I don't want to spoil it for myself.
Yeah, I'm the same with.
I've done that a couple of
I've
times.
been saving up Cinema Sins have a podcast, and I've been saving up episodes of theirs where they do these little mini pods where they review movies, and I haven't got to see the movies yet, so I can't listen to the mini pods yet.
Exactly.
And I've
This is it.
saved them to the podcast app,
drive.
so I can get
Yeah.
back to them later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What else? Knuckleheads. They've been kind enough to give us a shout out a couple of times because me, Jeremy, and Chris White spammed them with questions for one of their episodes,
Oh,
and they
right.
kept seeing Talk Star Wars in mine and Jeremy's names.
Right.
So they're like, these Talk Star Wars guys, we need to give their show a listen because they're obviously listening to us. It's like, yeah, too right, motherfucker.
Awesome.
But they're good fun. Like that's the one where I said if you can once you get through the audio because the audio is a little bit hard to follow. It's sometimes hard to hear them clearly because the audio is a bit it suffers from the same issues as this mic. Once you open it out, there's a lot of background. There's a bit of background noise.
Yeah.
But
Bad
the
as
show's
Steve?
really,
Yeah,
not quite as bad as that. No, you can still make out what they're saying. But I know for some people, especially those who listen to nothing but podcasts, some people are real purists about that stuff. I'm not because I would be a massive hypocrite given that I produce the Emotionally 14 podcast because they suffer from the same issue, loads of background noise and stuff because the acoustics in the rooms we're recording are shite. In the same way, once you get past that, their show's really entertaining and I found it. Their most recent one was just an episode about pet peeves and I thought it was really good.
If you had to recommend, let's wrap this up in a minute because we're nearly at half hour.
Right.
That's plenty for the little for the After Dark side. I know Paul wants to get
That's
away,
fine.
but let's wrap up on one recommendation. If we were going to give the listeners homework
Yep.
to go and listen to at least one episode of a podcast,
Yes.
what would it be? And not
Ooh, good
ours.
question.
Let's step
Yeah,
away
obviously,
from the
yeah.
Commonwealth because it goes without saying that we love those shows.
I'll step away from Emotionally 14 as well because obviously I'm biased. Oh,
I can't give you anything. Sorry.
okay.
Seriously, I read. I don't listen. I read.
Fair enough.
So
Fair enough. Let me think.
But while you're thinking,
Fine.
let me just say that I would.
Yeah, go ahead.
I would recommend This American Life
Okay.
to anybody. I've been sort of putting together an idea to do another podcast of my own that exists outside of what we do on Talk Star Wars.
Yeah.
Which, for the briefest of moments, might have been called This British Life, but I decided that was too much of a con. I thought maybe it would. This American Life is such a wonderfully produced show, and when you hear the credits of their shows, there are tons of people involved, tons of producers, tons of engineers and hosts. And whatever. So it's not really doable for one person.
Okay.
But they sit down.
But you'd want to do something similar.
I want to do something similar to it. I want to be able to sit down with another person and a microphone and just have them tell their story. And that's essentially what you get when you listen to This American Life.
Yeah.
You get at least 3 stories a week. And they'll all be built around a central theme, but the stories will be really, really disparate. And I love that. And it's so well done, and it's so well thought out, and everything's so well balanced. It's an immaculately produced show. I just love everything about it. And I would say to anyone, if you're new to podcasting, why are you listening to us? But if you're new to podcasting or you are a podcaster, that's where I'd go, because you learn so much from it, and they set the bar so high. It's inspiring. Great stuff.
Okay.
Ira Glass is the producer. It's fantastic.
It's funny. I think great minds think alike on that one, because I've also in the past toyed with the idea of doing a solo produced show, which was just me interviewing somebody I know who does something like a creative, like an artist, or like you say, a podcast or a film director, or somebody I know who has a craft and who wants to just kind of get that craft in front of as many people as possible. Because I recognize how hard that can be in the modern world, because everybody has, there's so many podcasts, and there's so many good podcasts, and there's so many good blogs, and there's so many good films being made, indie films, indie games, indie TV, and all that stuff. All this stuff is high quality, and it's not impossible to get seen, but it is. You do have to really kind of chip away at it, and you do have to be willing to do a lot of spamming and a lot of stuff like that just to get your stuff in front of as many eyes as possible. Like, it's just one of those things you have to do in the modern world, because the barrier to entry technically is so low on all this stuff that anybody can do it. And that's what's great. In a way, that's great, because it means that people with genuine talent aren't hampered by, I'm good at, they may be an amazing film director, but they can't work the software. So they're not hampered by that anymore, because the barrier to entry is so low, and that's what's great about it. On the other hand, it does mean you struggle to stand out if you feel like you've got a product of quality.
Yeah, it's a pretty broad field now, but you're right. The democratization of the platform itself makes it easier for people to get out there. If they have got a genuine story to tell that has value, it will find an audience, just as we found an audience with Talk Star Wars.
Sure,
maybe a limited audience, but they're an active audience. And
I think it's a good audience. I think it's, like you say, it's certainly an engaged audience, and I love that about it.
That's enough.
I've said often how many times as a producer I'm a jealous man when it comes to that stuff. When it comes to the engagement side of things, I'm very envious as in terms of content production, as obviously a content provider for Talk Star Wars. I'm part of it, but
something like this Talk Star Wars thing, it's worlds apart from what This American Life might be, because.
Sure.
By design, really, Talk Star Wars is a community of people, and it gets to a point where you give it over to them, and we all feed off the same thing, really. Yeah. We're all interacting and talking, and we've got Connor's Corner every week. So Talk Star Wars has become democratized, and it's owned by everybody that's a part of that community.
Yeah.
And so, in a way, it's very different to what we're seeing with something like This American Life, which is very much like a documentary show, a documentary style show telling a very pointed story. And so you've got to be on point if you're going to deliver at that level. And my idea for a show of my own would be to give people a platform to tell their story, and a very focused story, which is that often the people we are and what we do are very different.
Okay.
You might find that there's somebody who works in IT, but they're really a talented photographer, and I'm interested in knowing what that story is, and a conversation about that would make a stunning podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Like I say, I've been of the same mindset, so it's interesting. Like I say, great minds think alike on that stuff. I was going to call mine Words with Friends, but obviously that dates as well, because obviously once the game Words with Friends has come and gone, it doesn't make sense anymore. But, I'm always good for that stuff. Names that sound great on, like the B Sharps. Every little less funny every time you hear it.
So if you were going to throw one out though, Rob, and you
Yes.
can't have This American Life because I've had it.
That's fine. I must confess to not being very familiar with This American Life in terms of regular listening. Let me see. Are we talking in terms of production or in terms of just
Whatever.
What's kind of my appointment listening? I guess.
Whatever does it for you, mate.
Let's have a look.
Whatever
So in
your
terms of
reasons
regular shows, yeah, I'm going to go with the Rubin Report. So for me, that is the show that encompasses. I suppose it speaks to my leanings the most out of every show I listen to with any kind of political side, because Dave Rubin, like me, is very much a kind of a socially liberal person, very much believes in freedom to do whatever and minimal intervention of outside forces on people's lives as long as they're not harming or doing something illegal. So I suppose it speaks to me very heavily in that regard, because it speaks to the stuff that bothers me about the lack of an option for my point of view in the political landscape. And again, his guests are fantastic, just very entertaining, and he has a wide range. He's had equal parts Roseanne Barr and Governor Jesse Ventura, who's also fascinating, by the way, beyond like in ways I can't even go into, like can't even put into words. He's just fascinating. He seems like a cool dude.
The Rubin Report.
The Rubin Report.
Awesome. Well, there you go. There's a couple of highly recommended shows from a couple of lowly appreciated podcasters.
Yeah. And obviously the ones I mentioned. Oh, and Carlos Candido as well. Obviously, Thinking Out Loud. Love that guy.
Good guy.
Don't always
All
agree,
right.
but I love him. He's a lovely guy.
Let's kick this episode into touch then.
Let's do it.
On Talk Star Wars on Twitter.
I'm Rob Wade Vision. Oh yeah, Paul's gone.
And Paul.
Oh no, he's still there.
You still there, Paul?
He's at Movie Score News.
Paul's at Movie Score News.
And not at his workstation where he should be.
Yeah. And maybe he's even on mute. Okay. We'll catch you guys next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.